Hey everybody, welcome to Build Weekend Watch, where we tell you all about what's new on Netflix, dropping in theaters, and hitting every other platform you glue your eyeballs to. Just in case you're like us on this stage and are what people usually refer to as an indoor person. I'm Ricky Camilleri, and I'm joined by Yahoo's Ethan Alter and Adam Lance Garcia. And now, before we move on to discussing new television and movies, I want to take a quick moment to remember Anthony Bourdain, the chef, TV host, and all-around enthusiast of things good, who sadly passed away this morning. I had the chance to interview him a few times over the years here at Build. Let's take a quick look at a clip of our interview.
So the ability to tell a story is creatively satisfying. To be able to focus exclusively on people and places that interest me. I mean, most people in media, the boss tells them, you're doing a segment on, the rutabaga shaped like Nixon today, or, the heartwarming story of someone you don't care about at all. I don't live by those rules. I've been really fortunate to do what I want, and have, in an almost evangelical way, talk about people doing things I care about.
Let's just briefly talk before we get into movies and TV about, what we loved about Anthony Bourdain a little bit. And a couple things for me. One, it's really hard to lose somebody who feels like they were never full of shit, who was just as honest and as pure as they could possibly be. There's something about that loss that feels even more painful, or like there's a void that is going to be really left there. And the second thing, and I've said it a couple times today in interviews on this stage, is that he was a phenomenal gateway, I think, for so many people. You tuned into his show and you learned about new food that you didn't know about. You learned about movies that you didn't know about. You learned about music that you didn't know about. And if it was your first time learning about those things, he was opening a door for you to learn about the things that taught the thing that he was teaching you about. And you could just backtrack forever and learn the history of a lot of different things, starting with him and the doors that he opened for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, to your point, one thing I always really appreciated was how he acted as the global ambassador for food. And I really love that. I was able to grow up, my father was a diplomat, so I grew up overseas and got to eat abroad early on. And I think what he did was really show how, as much as great as it is to bring other cultures into your own kitchen, it's even better to go to those other cultures and experience them out there in where they originated. And I think that was always something I really admired about him. He was a big proponent of getting out into the world and really seeing it and eating as much as he could.
And the idea that how we eat and where we eat so often defines us and who we are.
Yeah, as someone who hasn't traveled that much and really wants to, what I really appreciate about Bourdain was his bravery in terms of just traveling to parts unknown, places that...
you didn't mean to do that, did you?
Like the title
And you
of the
caught
show.
yourself.
Hey, that's the title of the show. I just feel like watching the few episodes that I have, just his bravery and going to places and talking to people on a level that I think a lot of Americans today are sort of scared to do. And opening up the world to viewers who would never risk that, I think, is something that is gravely lost today.
And he was just funny. I mean, when I remember the first time I read Kitchen Confidential, there were so many amazing secrets and moments that he just scribbled down in that book that were hilarious to me. And he was very honest and forthright about, and no BS ever. Like, he was always very honest and very funny about it. So.
And now there are 7 seasons of Parts Unknown that are on Netflix that if you don't like any of the things that we mentioned now or don't care about them, you can go tune into those 7 seasons, maybe marathon them. And I will say his last episode of Parts Unknown that he aired took place in Hong Kong, and it was with the famous cinematographer Christopher Doyle, who shot so many of Wong Kar-wai's films. Now, if you watch the 7 seasons of Parts Unknown and you still have time, I highly recommend looking at some of Christopher Doyle's work, who Anthony was such a champion of. You can go watch some of Wong Kar-wai's films set in Hong Kong. They're some of the most beautifully photographed and edited films there really ever was. So let's move on. Let's talk about some of the other stuff that's coming out this week. First up, we have Ocean's 8, the new Ocean's spinoff with a star-studded female cast led by Sandra Bullock and Cate Blanchett. The film centers on Debbie Ocean, Danny Ocean's estranged sister, and her team of cons as they attempt to rob the Met Gala, and according to reviews, all get upstaged by a hilarious Anne Hathaway. Take that, Hatha haters. Let's take a look at the trailer.
In 3.5 weeks, the Met will be hosting its annual ball, and we are going to rob it. Lucky you. $16.5 million in each of your bank accounts 5 weeks from now.
That's a lot.
They've got every inch of this place covered.
This is the most sophisticated security in the world.
This movie looks fantastic. I personally have not seen it. The cast is unbelievable. I believe the two of you have seen it. Take it away, boys.
It's definitely the.
Clearly the core market for this,
Yeah,
this
really
movie.
are.
Tell us your opinion.
I will say it is the best entry into the series since the first Ocean's 11, the remake. The cast is a lot of fun. The heist is kind of tense in a lot of ways, very exciting. The milieu is very close to Soderbergh. It just feels like you kind of wish this was the second entry in the series. Like you kind of wish that 12 and 13 never happened. Because,
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, no, look, some of us are monsters, and some of us understand that 12 and 13 should never have been seen. It's just a lot of fun, and the cast is great. I mean, Sandra Bullock feels like she could be Danny Ocean's sister. Cate Blanchett, you can't not look at her when she's on screen, even when she's not talking. She just has that charisma, and they all 8 women play off each other so well. I do have some criticisms, but we'll get to that in a minute. But overall, I just had a really good time. Right. And it's been a long time since I've gone to a movie and just had a fun time.
Right. Yeah, one of the things I really liked about it is that the trailer we just watched, like that trailer is the movie. If you liked that trailer, if you thought it was stylish and fun and looked funny, that's exactly the movie. And I feel especially in the summer season, we're so used to seeing, the blockbuster trailers and we go see the movie and it disappoints inevitably. This one actually lives up to the promise of what's teased. If you want just a really good heist movie with a great cast, really beautiful cinematography, this delivers. And it's nice to see that.
Is it true that Anne Hathaway steals the show, even amongst all these incredible performers?
She certainly has a lot of the biggest beats, and I think because she leans in the heaviest to her public persona, as everyone said, like she is sort of answering the haters directly back.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Can I ask how so, without any spoilers?
I was actually sort of surprised that she didn't play herself in the movie. Like I was totally expecting her to be Anne Hathaway, but she plays a fictional character, a fictional actress, and it's like she's aloof and full of herself, and look at my...
In that voice, too.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Sounding exactly like this, someone who has their allergies killing them all day. She really leans into it. Mm-hmm. It's really impressive, and I kind of respect her more for that because... there's a lot of...
not the Oscar.
Not the Oscar. Right. Not for the Oscars. But one thing like James Van Der Beek, Anne Hathaway sort of leaning into this idea of what the public thinks of her and just being like, yeah, that's what you think of me, and I'll play to that. And sort of poking fun of it is just really refreshing.
Yeah. And there are other people in the movie, too, who do that a little bit, like Mindy Kaling is sort of playing off her persona from the Mindy Project of someone who's sort of unlucky in love and looking for like a long-term love interest, and that sort of comes across in little bits. Rihanna is playing into her sort of mythic status as this, object of fascination by everyone. So they've really smartly cast it.
How is Rihanna in the film? She is someone with an incredible presence who I feel like has never been utilized quite well on screen.
Right. Oh, Valerian, her scenes in Valerian are one of the few good parts of that movie.
Wow, you brought up Valerian.
Yeah, I know, right? There we go. It's a classic Rihanna
Always
right there.
take the moment to bring up Valerian.
You have to. Yeah. No one else will, so I will.
You're on an airplane and push the wrong button.
It's just like, hey, Valerian.
Valerian. No, she's good. Again, she is sort of leaning into our idea of her, our public image of her, but also twist it in some fun ways. And she gets to she doesn't have the biggest laughs in the movie, but I think when she appears on screen, you can tell how much everyone in the cast is sort of enamored with her. Like she really does get these little moments that sort of steal the show in the background. I think she's sort of analogous almost to like the Casey Affleck part from the first from the Ocean's 11 or one of those sort of scenes that are in the background. They're not always the focus, but they get their sort of scene-stealing moments, and you come away remembering them.
Up next, we have Hereditary, which is hitting theaters today, and it's the light family comedy, Little Sunshine-esque movie starring Toni Collette. Let's take a look.
Who's gonna take care of me
You don't think I'm gonna take care of you?
when you die?
Sorry, I recognize you from your mother. How is your relationship with your daughter? What?
Peter?
Charlie? Are you okay? Charlie? Please stop.
Charlie! Charlie!
Please stop.
Charlie! What's happening?
Very, very sweet family comedy. I've seen Hereditary. I'm a big horror movie fan, and I especially love when horror is taken seriously and done well, which we're seeing more and more artists begin to do that, as it's almost like, I think, the only kind of independent film you can maybe get financed right now. People sort of forced to take it seriously. And I loved Hereditary. It sort of takes so many horror movie tropes from good and bad movies and makes them all pretty good in this. There are moments where you're like, oh, you are basically doing a kind of Blumhouse ghost movie right now, but you're doing it better. You're basically doing almost like a found footage horror movie, but doing it better right now. It does everything that a horror movie should do and does it well.
Right. No, I'm a little more mixed on it, and certainly some of the trailer footage there sells the scares very well, and there are some big scares in the movie for sure. I think it reminded me a lot of a movie like Rosemary's Baby, which I thought it's clearly has on the brain and doesn't quite get.
I think the director, not to interrupt you, I think the director pitched it to one of the actors as Ordinary People Meets Rosemary's Baby, which is there isn't a better way to describe the movie. If that's what he started with, he really finished with that as well.
He did, exactly. No, and I definitely think if you are in the mood for scares, this has it for sure. This has some big, very effective, scary moments. I wanted a little more, I guess, the sweatiness to it, for lack of a better word. There's that sort of churning feeling in your gut when you're watching something truly, truly unnerving, and I never really got to that place with this. But there were moments certainly where I was unnerved, I'll say.
So I have not seen it yet, mostly because I'm scared by like the dark and by anything. So for someone like myself who is easily scared, what should I know going in? Like, what should I prepare myself for?
It turns all of the screws to try to scare you. Like it leaves nothing behind to try to scare you.
Oh, good. So I'm gonna have a great time.
Exactly.
There's nothing about it that's like, oh, this type of thing scares me, and it doesn't have that, so maybe I'll like it. It has every type of thing to try to scare you.
Here's a question. So this is more of a general. What's scarier, creepy talking dolls or talking children?
Valerian.
I've got nothing on that one. Yeah, that was good. Yeah,
sure. Somehow features both.
Yeah, it probably does.
Valerian. I really enjoyed Hereditary, and Toni Collette gives. She is really a legend, and I think an unsung legend of movies, in the sense that she never reached a Cate Blanchett status. She never reached a Sandra Bullock status or anything like that. But she is really a phenomenal actress who always pulls out all stops and does great work when she comes out.
Right. No, and certainly we've already heard there's a push to get her Oscar recognition for this, and she hasn't received a nomination, I think, since The Sixth Sense. So it would be appropriate that her next nomination, if she receives it, would be for another horror movie.
And there are definitely a number of moments in this that will work very well for the Oscar, the Oscar clip there.
Do you think she should get it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know anything else that's come out so far that's been as impressive as I think her performance is. And I think if there is a certain amount of, and maybe Get Out has changed this, a certain amount of stigma when it comes to horror movies that I think she has to surpass. But yeah, I don't think I've seen a more go for broke this performance this year.
Okay.
You know, and I think if it was someone like Jake Gyllenhaal who put a performance in like that, we'd already be talking about whether or not he's going to get nominated in a much more kind of like, he's definitely going to get nominated. There wouldn't be any question about it.
So I'll go see this with the lights on and my doll, my bear, and my cats.
And some creepy children.
And some creepy children.
Right.
And some creepy children.
You're going to bring creepy children?
Well, they follow me around everywhere. So it's
true. It's a real problem.
It's a real problem.
Right.
Up next, another movie with pretty heavy star power. It's Hotel Artemis, starring Jodie Foster, Sterling K. Brown, Jeff Goldblum, Charlie Day, and many, many, many more. It's a bit like an infomercial when it comes to everything it has. A film follows the pandemonium that takes place when a couple of bank robbers show up at a hospital that caters only to criminals. It's like if there was a hospital inside the White House.
Oh.
This hospital was built on trust and rules.
People don't always do what they're told.
Rule number 1, don't kill any other patients.
Why don't you skip the fuck along?
No water in LA, but it's raining assholes in here.
I gotta fucking kill you now!
And I don't really want to do that, because I feel like we got chemistry.
Things are going to hell in a handbasket full of blood and shit!
So, Hotel Artemis. I really like the people that made this movie.
There's a lot of really interesting people in it.
And I really like the spirit
Yeah.
behind the idea of the movie? Go ahead.
There's a butt coming.
No,
I-
I'm going to let you handle the butts.
So, is this like the John Wick of hotels?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much. Okay.
The setting is very cool. Basically, the idea is
John Wick has a hotel. It's one of its
right.
central places, a hotel.
Exactly. You could tell they were like, okay, they already did the hotel for criminals thing. What if we did the hospital for criminals thing? So, but that's, I mean, it's a neat idea. I mean, certainly this with past week with the whole ACA controversy about not about the Justice Department not standing for the law,
positions.
right?
Yeah.
To make it political again. It feels like it's a timely topic about the idea of like what does healthcare become, and so in this imagining the hotel becomes a hospital for people in need who have no other place to go for coverage, and that's a really great idea and a great premise, and I could see like a great graphic novel or comic book sort of spinning out of this, but
It goes wildly unexplored.
exactly
Yeah.
like they have the great idea and they never quite get the story to follow it up, despite having some terrific people in it and some really good scenes. There's some really good individual scenes, I think, but there's something just lacking from it all throughout.
So in this world, like being a criminal is a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
It's true. And
I
it's not
really hope that
covered.
joke was going to land, and it didn't.
No.
So
That wasn't bad. That was
no, I
good.
tried.
That was all right. Yeah. The central problem with this, with
The joke or
with,
the movie?
No, with Artemis, and I think you kind of nailed it. Was that something is amiss?
Right.
It's hard to pinpoint exactly what's amiss, but you go through so many scenes, going like just questioning why that scene was that way and not a different way
Yeah.
that would have led you somewhere else and have propelled the movie forward. Nothing feels like you're being propelled forward with Artemis, even though I feel like on paper you would read something that has all the plot points and all the necessary beats of a movie.
Right.
While watching it, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's missing all those beats.
you wonder, like, is it something that happened from like the script to development to like editing phase? Like, was that all in the script? If you're going to get that cast of characters, like if you're going to get Jodie Foster to do anything and have Jeff Goldblum and everyone else in this film to be in the movie, the script had to be at least halfway decent.
Well, the one thing is that the script does come from the director, so it certainly is not a case of someone taking over a property before. Drew Pearce has both wrote it, directed it.
Gotcha.
It seems the main creative force behind it. So I don't think it changed hands. And I mean, Jodie Foster and sci-fi don't always go together, as Elysium proves. So it might just be a case of
This is really Jodie Foster in comedy. I found so much
That's
of
true,
what
too.
she's doing in this movie is a kind of broad comic performance that, again, is not fitting very well in the world that this director has created. And so many of the performances feel like they don't fit inside the world of the movie, or the movie sometimes doesn't feel like it fits inside the world of like this great performance, and things just feel consistently amiss.
Yeah.
So why does John Wick work then? Because if like this doesn't work.
Because it's John Wick.
I know, but like
it knows what it is. It's an action movie. I
That's
think
good-
I would
yeah.
say it would be fair to say that this one doesn't quite have a handle on what it wants to be. I think you're right. There's comedy in it. There's a little sci-fi in it. There's
John Wick is so simple and clear
Right.
and almost beautiful because of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like dog gets killed, guy goes on vengeance spree.
Yeah.
It takes place in this world that, you know, sort of is different than the one that we have. Whereas this, it's surprisingly convoluted. Like more plot points and characters keep getting thrown at you, and you're still not even sure why the whole thing exists while it's happening.
Gotcha.
yeah.
Let's move on to the next movie.
We'll go past that one.
From 1968 to 2001, the late Fred Rogers, affectionately known as Mr. Rogers, warmed our hearts and invited us to be his neighbors. Now, director Morgan Neville explores the life and legacy of the beloved icon in his new documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor? I don't have any jokes to end this one because it's Mr. Rogers. He's too nice. Why joke about him?
Children have very deep feelings, just the way everybody does. There must be times when you do feel blue. I'm not feeling blue right now, though.
Me neither.
Thank you for whatever you do to bring joy and hope, light and love to our world today. Please won't you be my neighbor?
So I haven't seen Won't You Be My Neighbor, but I'm crying just
Yeah,
watching the trailer.
I kind of wonder, like, is the audience crying right now? Because I would
look out
be.
and see. Hold,
Like,
raise your
she's
hands.
crying hysterically. I have to,
I know that you have seen it.
Yes.
Ethan, so tell me about it.
Well, I'll set the scene for you a little bit. I saw it in a screening room here in New York, filled with press types and critics and everyone. And about 5 minutes in, I think I heard my first audible sniffle. It might have been me. I won't claim to it. And then after that, as the movie unfurled, there was even more and more audible sniffles going and full-on crying happening, some sobs. You know, it definitely, it really does hit you. I think, especially if you grew up with Mr. Rogers, it
What
brings
about
back.
it is so emotional?
I think part of it is just the power of that footage. Again, it speaks to a certain nostalgia on a lot of kids' parts who are that a part of that generation. I would be curious. I have a kids, a 10 and a 7-year-old, and I'd be curious to take them and see would they have the same reaction since they have no connection to the show in the way I did. But I think it's also just so simple. There's something about Fred Rogers as a person that is so simple and pure, and you are drawn to that. There's just emotion watching him and looking at him and hearing him talk.
Now, this is going to be bleak, so bear with me here for a second. Mr. Rogers, 1968 to 2001 is quite some time, and it's a lot of different kinds of America happened in those times. But watching this, I felt nostalgic for at least something that felt universal, that was innocent and universal at the same time, and there was no discussion about it. There was no division about what it was, and that's what I felt nostalgia about when I watched this trailer, because it feels that we do live in this time where nothing like Mr. Rogers can exist, where there's just no dissent. There is dissent and division about everything, and Mr. Rogers was something where there wasn't that.
he is a really rare unifying figure, and I think that's the hardest thing watching this trailer. And in speaking to the director, Morgan Neville, recently, we both kind of came away feeling like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, you felt like you were a part of something bigger and something pure. And that is something that is, I think, distinctly missing in America right now. For a lot of us, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, I don't necessarily feel like we all can look at our neighbor and be like, hey, you're my friend, we're in this together. And Mr. Rogers made that sense, and again, looking at the trailer, we're missing that sense of community and a kind figure saying, like, it's gonna be okay. No matter what, it's gonna be okay, and we really don't have that right now. So.
Let's switch over to TV. We have AMC's new series Dietland, which is about an overweight ghostwriter for a fashion magazine editor who are both in the midst of a conspiracy plot to take down men accused of sexual assault. So it's not topical at all.
That's me, Plum Kettle. Working for the country's biggest beauty magazine. I answer letters to the picture-perfect Kitty Montgomery. But on the way to becoming my best self, I became part of a revolution.
Plum has a secret rebel heart.
Joy Nash, Juliana Margulies.
Witnesses say his body fell out of the sky.
Based on the critically acclaimed novel, Dietland.
So, guys,
yeah,
me and two men.
Yes, another appropriate
foremost people to talk to about this show, Dietland, and to criticize it. Clearly, it comes from our hearts.
Yeah.
No, I've seen a couple episodes of the show. The show is really good. I will say, Juliana Margulies is cast in this incredible role that she clearly has a great time with. I got to interview her about it, and she just couldn't. She gushed over the chance of playing such a kind of an evil figure and getting the best lines and coolest outfits. But what she will admit, as what I'm going to say, is that Joy Nash is an incredible find. This lead on the show is one of those few presences on screen where you immediately relate to anything that's going on in her eyes. You get everything. It reads beautifully. She is a real true star. And she's going to, whether Dietland takes off or not, she's going to be doing a lot of stuff after this.
Yeah, no,
and considering how weird the show is, it's like unapologetically weird. It's a bit mix of Fight Club and Pushing Daisies and a murder mystery and,
magical realism at times as well.
Yeah, like it gets real trippy. Like I was watching and I was like, what is going on? And it took a minute to get into the series, but to your point, Joy Nash is so charismatic, and you're able to kind of just follow along with her journey as it gets weirder and weirder and weirder, because it's basically based on the novel Dietland, which was like Fight Club for women, which again, we are the perfect people to talk about.
Perfect.
And the thing about Joy Nash, too, is apparently she sought out this show.
Really?
Yeah, she was discovered by, essentially, she heard that the show was getting made. I think she was done a lot of YouTube videos. She was a sort of an actress trying to get in, and she just kept contacting the producers and the casting department to try to get an audition. Like, it was really her perseverance that, and her talent, but she persevered heavily to try to get the role.
Yeah. I'll give a quick shout out to Marty Noxon, who's the showrunner of it. She's someone who's certainly been around for genre television for a while. She was on Buffy back in the day. She created Point Pleasant, which is an early aughts show that I was a fan of. Short-lived, but a lot of fun. And that also, Point Pleasant also played with a lot of different genres. And I sort of look to Dietland's Special Flourishes as being the Noxon touch. She really finds a way to try and bring together lots of different influences into this one show.
Wasn't she on the first season of Unreal as well?
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Before she parted ways with that show.
The first season's like best season.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, you can sort of chart a certain line after she left, but
still an interesting show after she left. But there was a thread that was in the first season that was I think missing, or a subtlety even. Definitely not a subtle show, but a slight subtlety in the first season that was missing in the later ones.
So I see a lot of her personality in this, which is interesting.
And this sort of like the same thing with like Ocean's 8. It is very refreshing to have a cast of mostly female, really strong female characters interacting with each other and not being wholly defined by their relationship to men and trying to make their way in the world and pushing back against some of the crap that they have to deal with every day. And that it is very refreshing, and as a cis-wise white male, I need to see stuff like this, and I'm glad that it's out there.
Yeah, when I mentioned to Juliana Margulies that it felt like a magical realist tone at times and very trippy and far out there, and she said, that's because you don't live in our heads. It makes sense to women. And it's like, fair.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough.
No answer to that.
Let's talk about American Woman. Yesterday was the premiere of Paramount Network's new show. It tells the story of 3 women exploring their independence in the midst of second-wave feminism in the 1970s. The show is loosely based on the life of executive producer Kyle Richards, one of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, who also stars in it, so the show connects directly to the aughts wave of housewives feminism, also known as the I'm not sure this is productive wave.
Feel like you just woke up in someone else's life?
This is Hollywood. I feel like that every single day.
If you're gonna make it in this town, you're going to need some balls. Is she with you? She's my friend. Now that takes balls. I like my life without you. We are all stronger than we think we are. You know, women can start businesses.
Look at you. Why in the world would you let a girl like you go?
It was almost as if I had a mind of my own. American woman! Strap yourself in, it's gonna get rough.
Now, I haven't seen American Woman. I will say that based off of the trailer, my spidey instincts are telling me that it tries a little too hard in the same way that that Amazon show that was about
Good Girls Revolt.
Good Girls Revolt.
Yeah.
Again, was like, I loved the setting, I loved the topic, but it felt like it was just trying a little too hard to land something.
Yeah.
But you guys have seen it, right? So tell me what you think.
Yeah.
The trailer's better than the show. I mean, I hate to say
theme
that.
of this,
I mean, like I was watching them, like I really wish that was the show I watched. It's just, it's a 30-minute show.
Right.
And the first episode really does a lot within that 30 minutes, but it's a little too quick. And it's a little on the nose in terms of their dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you were talking about this earlier, just it's...
Yeah, it has a tendency to sort of state what it's saying and say or state what it's about instead of showing us what it's about. And it did make me go back and appreciate Mad Men more in terms of how that show really was about its time without telling you it's about the time. This one tends to tell you. I will say the one thing I did like was seeing Alicia Silverstone front and center again. I think it sort of reminded me that after Clueless, she never really got the roles that maybe she deserved. I know, right? Yeah, even watching her, I felt
Clueless is the best.
It's true.
Such a great movie.
It is, and I feel and I'm always sorry that her career never went where it potentially could have for whatever reason. And so it's nice to see her, even in a show that's flawed, she's still quite good in it. And I hope it leads to, and I think as the season unfolds, it'll be interesting to see her bring different layers to it than we've maybe seen in the first episode, especially.
Yeah.
Clueless is one of those movies where anytime you go back, we're going to take a minute here. We're going to talk about Clueless. I don't know if it's obvious. My show, I want to talk about Clueless. You go back, you watch Clueless, and it is consistently a show that shocks you, or a movie that shocks you because of how much every scene works.
Also, how Paul Rudd has that aged.
Yeah.
Paul Rudd's immortal. He is a vampire I'm putting that out there right now.
Or he's got a
Paul Rudd
portrait
is a
in his
vampire.
attic somewhere.
But you don't expect it to be, even after you've seen it and you know it's good, you don't expect it to be as good as it is. And it's a very good show, and also a testament to what comedies or studio comedies could be in the 90s, because you watch all the sets, all the costumes, all the performances, the number of actors in scenes, and you're like, oh, movies just don't get this much money anymore to do something like this.
Yeah, that's true.
Guys, I love Clue.
It's true. 2 underrated Silverstone movies, Excess Baggage and the one she did with Brendan Fraser where he's in a fallout shelter.
Blast from the Past.
There we go, Blast from the Past. I will.
Excess Baggage with Benicio del Toro.
Excess Baggage is sort of an
At least he didn't bring up
interesting-
Batman and Robin. If you brought up Batman and Robin, that'd be like talking about
But
Valerian.
Excess Baggage
Wasn't Excess Baggage just a Life Less Ordinary ripoff, which was just not a very good movie?
But with Benicio del Toro in it. Benicio del Toro, late 90s Benicio del Toro is sort of a fascinating creature. So I give it a a lot of credit for that. You watch that. It's of its time.
All right,
in a good way.
fair. All right, released today on Netflix were the final episodes of the Wachowski siblings' Sense8. Excuse me. They were the masterminds behind The Matrix, V for Vendetta, and a bunch of other stuff. The show was one of Netflix's first big-budget ventures, and while it only had a small fan base, it was quite loyal to the gender-busting, sexuality-stretching, globe-trotting series. Let's take a look at a clip.
We're getting close to the chairman.
For millennia, my kind have subjugated yours. Fortunately, I know a single simple cure to shut them all up.
Pull the trigger. Do it!
Even after everything we've been through, would any of us go back to the world we're used to?
So I remember when the show first got announced, and the CEO of Netflix used the Wachowskis' most recent film, Cloud Atlas, as an example, and said, you know, imagine if they were able to tell that story over the span of an entire series, how much more sense it would make.
Right.
No pun intended.
Sense8?
And I went and watched the show, the first season, and I was like, no, it still doesn't make that much sense. But I didn't stick with it. You have stuck with it.
I haven't watched it because I've been really burned by the Wachowskis, and also even though I'm a big J. Michael Straczynski fan who helped create the show, I'm scared of it. So Ethan, tell us why.
Well, again, I'm the biggest Wachowski defender / apologist you can find.
You apologize for when
everything. He apologizes for everything.
I apologize for Jupiter Ascending, for sure. That gets an apology. That I love them so much I pretend it almost didn't happen. I just sort of blocked that out conveniently. But I think in this case, what I like about Sense8, it sort of does speak to what they're sort of brilliant at, and also what frustrates people in that they don't. It's big, it's messy, it's incoherent at times, but it also loves its characters with just this burning hot intensity that's really passionate. And I think that's why the fan base that does love it really responds to the show, because it's clear how much the Wachowskis care about everyone on screen.
Are the storylines clear?
No. Even watching the finale, it's 2.5 hours, and even there, it doesn't have enough time to sort of fit in what it needs to do. But it sort of gets...
Can I ask you a question? I know that you're a Wachowski apologist.
Don't get me started
slash defender.
Yeah.
Slash defender.
Defender.
Is it that it has enough time, doesn't have enough time to fill in or to put in what it needs to put in to tell the story? Or are they just maybe not as great at telling stories as we had hoped?
I think that it's that
I still think they're great directors.
Oh, sure.
Great director doesn't necessarily mean like a perfect storyteller.
Absolutely.
I kind of feel like the Wachowskis, they put their idea cart in front of the story horse.
Right.
Like they're like, big ideas, and that's great.
Right.
But that's like, if you want to get down to what my problem with both of the Matrix sequels.
Brilliant, by the way. Valerian. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. All right. Well, like, if you want to get to like what's wrong with those, and what I really didn't enjoy with everything basically since then, beyond V for Vendetta, is that they're like, we've got this really great idea, and we'll figure out the story later. And I think from everything I've heard and seen about Sense8, they just kind of do that.
They do. I mean, it's certainly, they put the emotions ahead of logic, and that can be frustrating for people. I don't mind it because I like the emotions they're chasing, and I think they hit it more often.
What emotions are they chasing?
I think they're chasing love, they're chasing passion, they're chasing, well, yes, but not all of us succeed.
Not all of us are helming a Netflix, a big budget Netflix series.
Right. And the other thing I'd say about it, just not to turn this into Build After Dark or anything, but I think it's one of the best sort of shows about sex and sexuality
Build
out
After
there.
Dark.
Exactly. Lower the lights for other reasons. But it's one of the most sex positive shows out there. It really it treats sex in a way that's not sniggering or sophomoric. There's an orgy sequence in season 1 that's almost a piece of erotic art that almost classifies, and they top themselves in terms of that sequence in the series finale, where they call that back and do like one of the most
bigger orgy.
A bigger orgy. But it's really but it's not done in a way that again is sort of provocative just for provocative's sake. It actually is very impassioned and not about trying to not prurient. It's really interesting to see that, and I think it should be celebrated for that too.
And I will say though, if someone who's like sort of reticent to try Sense8, J. Michael Straczynski, one of the other co-creators of the show, he created a show called Babylon 5, which is one of these underrated masterpieces that just got to Amazon Prime. So this is a little like subsection of your weekend watch. Like if you want to watch a show that is densely plotted with amazing characters, with a season finale like no other, check out Babylon 5. I cannot speak to that enough. Right. I mean, it's low budget, and you're gonna feel the budget, and it's like early days of CGI and HD, but there are characters in there that you will love instantly, like Lando Malari. Like I love him. I'm not going to do his accent now, but
it is all about love. I told you. So there we go.
You know, you had to bring it back.
Now, naturally, you have to mention any new content that comes to the Freeform channel, and they've got a new show by an upstart new company called Marvel. Oh, wait a second, flip that. It's Marvel that you have to mention. No one actually cares about Freeform. But let's take a look at Cloak and Dagger, whatever that is.
You and I are connected.
Assess our limits. I know who you are.
We need to get out of here. Stop!
Hold my hand. We'll show these assholes a divine pairing.
Any good?
Yeah. I mean, it's a slow burn. I think one of the things that I really enjoy about this show and what Marvel is good at is taking people that have superpowers and not necessarily superheroes. I really enjoyed their discovery of their powers. I really enjoyed the dichotomy of the two characters. They're basically, for those of you who aren't big geeks like me, Cloak and Dagger are sort of a superhero pair. One is a white woman, one is a black man, and their powers are intrinsically connected, where it's sort of mysterious as to why they have these powers. But this series just like it does a really good job of making you care about them and sort of interesting in discovering the purpose of their powers. That being said, it is a slow burn, and that is the thing that Marvel does not do well, which is that they just think that everything has to follow the Netflix model of binge-worthy television, and it takes forever for something to happen. And while it is intriguing and interesting to watch, I would have loved just like by the end of episode 2, like all that stuff to happen in episode 1. So
I do not understand the binge model having only 3 things happen in a 10-episode series. Like a show that came out, and I didn't binge it because I watched it weekly this past year, was Barry. And I thought that show, I mean, if I had started watching that show in a day and all of the episodes were available, I would have blown through them. I couldn't get enough of that show. But also, every episode had a ton of story and raised the stakes beautifully. There was nothing slow burning about that show. It was a TV show. It was episodic. Even if you are a serial show, you have episodes. You should have heavy story in each episode.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I'm sorry to step on you.
Oh, no.
I was going to say that's like the one thing that the CW shows do good as superhero shows, since we're going to compare superhero shows to superhero shows. Like you can have on The Flash an overarching narrative that every episode touches upon, but every episode is propulsive and fun and light on its feet, sometimes to its own detriment, but at least you don't feel like you've watched nothing happen, and Cloak and Dagger does have that.
The one thing I'll stick up for, again, sort of sticking up for the stars of the show, I think Marvel has always been very good with casting.
Oh, yeah.
And they found 2 really good actors to play Cloak and Dagger. And I think that they make up for a lot of the sort of the slow pacing of the series, the fact that they are very charismatic. I would love to see more scenes of them together. That's a big problem with the show, is that because they're pacing it out, we don't see them together very often at first. But even on their own, they're really interesting. And I think that once we get through the whole origin story, which hopefully isn't all season long, once they're put together and are a duo, I think it'll be a very strong duo because they're both really good performers. And I think that's something that Marvel does do well.
Yeah.
Maybe pacing is their issue, but in general, from their movies to their TV shows, they've generally cast the right person in each role. So I think they've done that here.
So we went through Ocean's 8, Hereditary, Hotel Artemis, Won't You Be My Neighbor, Dietland, American Woman Sense8, and Marvel's Cloak and Dagger. Out of all of those, Ethan, what are your 2 picks? Adam, and what are yours? Ethan first.
Let's see. Well, I'm going to say Ocean's 8 again for the reason that it's exactly the movie the poster promises. So if you like that poster, you're going to like the movie. And then I'm going to say the Sense8 finale, because if you watch that show and are invested in that show, you'll want to see how it ends. And it has the most memorable orgy scene since Short Bus. So I'll give it that.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. Marion and Short Bus. Those are my
I would say I would agree with Ocean's 8. It's just a fun movie. It's a great night out. And Won't You Be My Neighbor? Because I think everyone needs that sort of cathartic cry and just a reminder of what makes the best of us.
I'm going to say Hereditary because I like scary movies, and it's pretty scary, and it's a well-done horror movie, which we get very few of, even though we're getting more and more. And I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say an episode of Parts Unknown or No Reservations, and pour one out for Anthony Bourdain because he's a hero and an icon, and we lost him today, and that's quite sad.
Yeah.
But that's it for us. Let's thank Ethan and Adam. Maybe give them a round of applause, guys. Of course, I'm Ricky Camilleri, and thanks for tuning in to Build Weekend Watch, the show critics are calling not a show. See you next week.